There is a kind of power that does not come from calmness. It is born inside turbulence. Most people spend their lives trying to silence their inner chaos. They suppress anger, drown anxiety in distraction, numb restlessness with comfort. They believe peace is the absence of disturbance. And because of that belief, they remain weak. In Japanese thought, there is a forgotten concept called Ikki, not rebellion in the political sense, but an inner uprising, a moment when suppressed energy refuses to stay buried. Ikki is the pressure building behind the ribs, the heat in the chest when something inside you knows it can no longer live small. Monks observed it, warriors feared it. Modern psychology mislabels it as dysfunction. Ikki is what happens when the nervous system is overloaded, but not yet broken. When emotion surges faster than logic. When your body prepares for change before your mind understands why. This state terrifies people because it feels unstable, uncontrolled, dangerous. But instability is not weakness. Unchanneled force is. A storm that scatters trees becomes a river when given direction. Lightning that destroys becomes power when grounded. The same is true for the human mind. The energy you call anxiety is stored vigilance. The anger you repress is bound boundary. The restlessness you fight is unused capacity. Ikki is not about becoming calm. It is about becoming precise. This path does not teach you how to get rid of inner turbulence. It teaches you how to stand inside it without collapsing, how to compress it, how to shape it, how to let it carve you instead of consume you. Some people sense this truth but never step into it. Others recognize it immediately, as if something ancient inside them has been waiting to be named. Chapter 1. The Awakening. The awakening rarely looks like clarity. It arrives as exhaustion, not the kind that sleep can fix, but the deeper fatigue of repeating the same internal cycle. You push forward during the day. You hold yourself together. You perform competence. Then at night, the pressure returns. Thoughts accelerate. The body tightens. The mind replays conversations, failures, imagined futures. You promise yourself tomorrow will be different. Tomorrow never is. This is the early stage of Ikki, the moment when the system can no longer release excess energy through distraction alone. You work, scroll, train, consume, and still something remains. An unnamed force keeps knocking from inside your chest. You feel it when you sit still. You feel it when noise fades. You feel it when life gives you a quiet moment and the quiet feels unbearable. Most people mistake this phase for weakness. They assume something is wrong with them. They search for calm, balance, comfort, relief. But relief only delays the pressure. It does not transform it. From a biological perspective, the body is doing exactly what it is designed to do. When an organism senses misalignment between capacity and expression, the nervous system increases arousal. More energy, more alertness, more tension. This is not a malfunction. It is preparation. The problem is that modern life gives no container for this state. There is no ritual for inner pressure, no training for emotional force. So the energy turns inward. Anxiety replaces motion. Anger turns into self-attack. Restlessness becomes self-doubt. You wake up already tired because the system never stood down. In Zen monasteries, this phase was recognized immediately. When a novice showed agitation, racing thoughts, or emotional volatility, they were not removed. They were given structure, more repetition, more form, more stillness under discipline. The turbulence was not suppressed. It was held. Ikki begins when you stop asking how to feel better and start asking a more dangerous question. What is this energy asking to become? This is the threshold moment, the point where you either sedate the signal or listen to it. One path leads back to comfort and stagnation. The other leads forward into a way of living that demands more precision, more honesty, and more responsibility. Nothing has changed yet on the outside, but inside, something has already stood up. Chapter 2. The Ancient Principle. Long before psychology named stress, monks named pressure. They observed that the mind does not collapse under force. It collapses under shapeless force. When energy has no direction, it turns corrosive. When it is given form, it becomes devotion. In Zen training, there is an understanding that inner turbulence is not an obstacle to awakening. It is the raw material. The monks did not seek serenity as a starting point. They used form to arrive at it. Fixed posture, fixed hours, fixed breath. The body was placed inside a narrow channel so the mind could no longer scatter. This is where Ikki finds its ancient counterpart. Dogen wrote that practice is not a means to calmness. Practice is the act of letting chaos exhaust itself inside a container strong enough to hold it. Modern neuroscience mirrors this insight. When the nervous system is placed inside predictable structure, arousal does not disappear. It reorganizes. The amygdala quiets. The prefrontal cortex regains influence. Energy becomes usable. The mistake modern seekers make is trying to regulate emotion before regulating form. They analyze feelings endlessly while living without rhythm. The monks did the opposite. They regulated the body first. The mind followed. There is a moment in this process that feels counterintuitive. When turbulence rises, the instruction is not to escape it. It is to narrow your world. Fewer choices, fewer variables, fewer movements. The narrower the channel, the more powerful the flow. This is where resistance appears. The ego hates form because form removes negotiation. It exposes excuses. It does not ask how you feel today. It asks who you are becoming through repetition. Somewhere in the middle of this discipline, something subtle shifts. The pressure that once felt threatening begins to feel purposeful. The same energy that created anxiety now fuels presence. This is the quiet moment where people realize they are no longer trying to control themselves. They are being carried by something deeper. Ikki, when guided by form, becomes alignment. The monks never called this emotional mastery. They called it sincerity, showing up fully to what is happening without ornament or avoidance, letting energy move through action instead of rumination. This principle is ancient because it works, not by calming the storm, but by teaching it where to go. Chapter 3. The Internal War. What begins as energy soon reveals itself as conflict. One part of you wants expansion, another wants safety. The nervous system prepares for movement while the mind clings to familiarity. This is the internal war that defines Ikki. Not a battle between good and bad, but between capacity and conditioning. Biologically, this struggle is inevitable. The limbic system detects threat and opportunity at the same time. Change feels dangerous even when it is necessary. So the body floods with readiness while the mind searches for reasons to stop. You feel driven and restrained in the same breath. This is why turbulence feels so exhausting. Energy is being generated but not discharged. The muscles tighten without movement. The breath shortens without exertion. Thought loops form as the mind attempts to resolve a conflict that cannot be solved through thinking. Most people interpret this state as personal failure. They say they lack discipline, clarity, or motivation. In reality, they are experiencing surplus force without command. A powerful engine with no steering. Here the war intensifies. The mind begins to label the energy as a problem. Anxiety becomes the enemy. Anger becomes shameful. Restlessness becomes a flaw. Once labeled, the system turns against itself. Self-correction becomes self-suppression. The pressure doubles. In Zen training, this phase was considered dangerous not because of the energy, but because of misinterpretation. When force is misunderstood, it fractures inward. When it is recognized, it can be recruited. There is a quiet moment here that few notice, a brief recognition that the turbulence is not trying to harm you. It is trying to move you. The war is not meant to be won. It is meant to be organized. Modern neuroscience confirms this. Suppression increases neural noise. Direction reduces it. When the body is given a clear demand, tension converts into execution. When the mind is given a single target, rumination collapses into focus. This is why people feel calmer during hard labor, long runs, or disciplined practice. Not because the energy disappears, but because it is finally used. Ikki demands the same resolution, not relaxation, but alignment. Not escape, but engagement. The internal war ends the moment you stop asking how to eliminate the pressure and start asking how to command it. The body is already ready. The energy is already present. What is missing is authority. This chapter is not about peace. It is about command presence inside yourself. The recognition that turbulence is not chaos, but untrained power waiting for instruction. Once this is understood, the war does not end. It changes sides. Chapter 4. The system power without structure burns its host. Structure without power collapses into routine. The system exists to hold both. In Zen training, structure was not negotiable. Wake time fixed, posture fixed, breath fixed. Not because monks worshipped rigidity, but because rigidity gave energy somewhere to go. When turbulence meets repetition, it stops splintering and starts compressing. This is the principle most people resist. They want freedom first. They want expression without constraint. But Ikki demands the opposite order. Constraint first, freedom later. A system is not a productivity hack. It is an identity cage you willingly step into. Few rules, clear edges, no interpretation. When the mind knows exactly what happens next, it stops arguing. When the body repeats the same sequence daily, it begins to obey before thought appears. Neuroscience explains why this works. Decision-making is metabolically expensive. Every choice drains authority. A system removes choice so authority can accumulate. Energy once wasted on negotiation becomes available for execution. The key is simplicity. One practice, one time, one form. The system must be boring enough that the ego loses interest. Boredom is not failure. It is surrender. At first, the turbulence resists. It searches for novelty. It asks for exceptions. It whispers that variation is growth. This is the old pattern trying to survive. The system does not respond. It repeats. Here is the quiet truth few articulate. Discipline is not forcing yourself to act. It is building a structure that makes not acting feel unnatural. Somewhere in the middle of repetition, something subtle locks into place. The pressure you once felt as agitation now feels like readiness. You stop bracing against yourself. You start moving with yourself. This is the moment when people realize they are no longer relying on motivation. The system is carrying them. The current is moving on its own. The system is not permanent. It is a forge. Once power is shaped, the structure can evolve. But not before. Changing the system too early leaks force. Keeping it too loose prevents compression. Ikki becomes usable only when it meets rules it cannot escape. The system does not ask if today is hard. It does not care how you feel. It only asks if you showed up. And when you do, day after day, turbulence stops being noise and starts becoming presence. Chapter 5. Practice without gaps. Power stabilizes through continuity, not intensity. Most people fail here, not because they lack discipline, but because they worship perfection. They believe practice only counts when conditions are ideal. When energy is high, when time is abundant, when the mind feels cooperative. Ikki does not survive that belief. The nervous system learns through uninterrupted signal. When practice stops, the body does not rest, it reverts. Old pathways reclaim ground immediately. This is why breaks feel heavier than beginnings. You are not starting again. You are fighting reoccupation. In Zen, continuity mattered more than quality. A short sit done daily was superior to a long sit done occasionally. The body does not care about promises. It responds only to repetition without gaps. Modern psychology confirms this. Consistency builds predictability. Predictability creates safety. Safety allows energy to stay mobilized without turning into anxiety. Gaps break trust between intention and action. Each break teaches the system that pressure leads nowhere. This is where the ego creates a trap. It whispers that partial effort is failure, that showing up imperfectly is dishonest, that waiting for the right moment is wisdom. This voice is not wisdom, it is avoidance disguised as standards. Practice without gaps means something very precise. When conditions collapse, the practice shrinks but never disappears. 5 minutes replaces 30. One movement replaces many. Presence replaces performance. There is a quiet shift here that few notice at first. When you remove the option to stop completely, resistance loses its leverage. The mind can no longer threaten you with collapse. It learns adaptation instead. This is the middle point where people realize something unsettling and freeing. The practice is no longer something they protect. It is something that protects them. In the monastery, illness did not cancel practice. Travel did not cancel practice. Emotional storms did not cancel practice. The form bent, but it never broke. Ikki matures here. Turbulence stops spiking because it trusts release is guaranteed. The system relaxes inside effort. You stop fearing hard days because hard days still move the current forward. Practice without gaps is not heroic. It is quiet, repetitive, almost invisible. But this is where identity rewires. You are no longer someone who practices when life allows it. You are someone whose life reorganizes around continuity. This is the point where power becomes stable, and stability is what makes it dangerous. Before we continue, answer these 2 questions. How many total chapters do you want for this script? Choose 7, 8, or 9. How many words should each of the remaining chapters be? Chapter 6. The Turning Point. There comes a moment when turbulence stops feeling like something to manage and starts feeling like something to trust. This moment is subtle. Nothing dramatic happens. No breakthrough emotion. No sudden calm. What changes is your relationship to pressure. You no longer brace against it. You move with it. By now, the system is stable. Practice continues without gaps. The body expects engagement. The nervous system no longer panics when intensity rises. It recognizes the signal and prepares to respond. This is where Ikki turns. The energy that once scattered your attention now sharpens it. You notice less mental noise. Thoughts still appear, but they no longer drag you with them. The body moves first. Action precedes analysis. This is not recklessness, it is coherence. Neuroscience calls this integration. When repeated action aligns perception, emotion, and movement, internal friction drops. Less energy is wasted on conflict. More becomes available for execution. You feel this as presence. The danger at this stage is subtle pride, the sense that you have figured it out, that you can loosen the structure now. This is where many lose what they built. The system did not give you freedom, it gave you alignment. Confuse the two and turbulence returns, sharper than before. In Zen training, this phase was watched closely. The student appears calmer, stronger, more focused. That is exactly when discipline was reinforced, not relaxed, not as punishment, but as protection. Ikki is now fuel. Fuel still needs containment. You begin to understand something quietly unsettling. This energy was never a phase. It was always part of you. The difference is that now it listens, not because it was tamed, but because it was given purpose. There is a growing sense of inevitability in your actions. You do not debate whether to practice. You do not negotiate with resistance. You simply move. Others may call this intensity. You know it as clarity. This is the turning point, where turbulence stops being something you survive and becomes something that carries you forward. And once crossed, there is no returning to the old way of living. Chapter 7. Transformation. Transformation is not peace, it is authority. You do not become calmer because life softened. You become calmer because nothing inside you is wasted anymore. Energy rises and you know where it goes. Pressure builds and you already have a channel waiting. Ikki no longer announces itself as anxiety or anger. It arrives as readiness, a quiet compression before action, a grounded alertness that does not seek validation or release. This is what people sense when they say, you feel different. You are not reactive, but you are not passive. You are not loud, but you are not small. Your presence has weight because it is integrated. Nothing inside you is arguing with anything else. The system did not remove your edges, it sharpened them. In Zen, this state was never celebrated. It was considered ordinary, just a person aligned with their nature, just energy flowing where it should. The extraordinary thing was how rare it had become. Modern life teaches people to sedate force, to smooth themselves down, to fear intensity. You chose the opposite path. You learned how to stand inside pressure without leaking it. The greatest shift is internal. You no longer ask how to get rid of difficult states. You ask how to use them. Fatigue becomes a signal. Anger becomes information. Restlessness becomes direction. Nothing is rejected. Nothing is dramatized. This is transformation, not a new personality, not a performance, but a stable way of being that does not collapse under strain. Others will sense it in how you move, how you speak, how you wait. You do not rush. You do not hesitate. Ikki has done its work. The inner uprising did not destroy you. It organized you. What once felt like chaos revealed itself as unclaimed power, and now that power answers to you. The final question is simple and unforgiving. What will you do with a force inside you that no longer resists your command? Ikki was never something you needed to create. It was something you needed to stop misusing. What you once called inner chaos was raw capacity without direction. What felt like instability was energy searching for form. You did not need to become calmer, softer, or quieter. You needed to become aligned. Through structure, continuity, and command, Turbulence learned where to go, not upward into fantasy, not inward into self-attack, but forward, into action that leaves no residue behind. This is why the change feels irreversible. Once energy experiences correct use, it resists misuse. You cannot unknow what it feels like to move without internal friction. You cannot return to numbing what now wants to be expressed. The world will still provoke you. Pressure will still rise. Life will not become gentle. But nothing inside you will scatter anymore. You have learned how to stand inside intensity without leaking it. This is what discipline was always meant to be. Not control, not punishment, but loyalty to what you are capable of carrying. Most people spend their lives managing symptoms. You chose to reorganize the source. Ikki did not make you extraordinary. It made you exact, exactly where your energy goes, exactly when it moves, exactly how much force is required and no more. From here on, nothing is wasted. Not effort, not emotion, not pressure. Only one thing remains uncertain. Now that your inner turbulence no longer owns you, will you live carefully or will you live deliberately?